I never thought I would find myself in a situation like this. Yet here I am, sitting in the quiet of our living room, staring at the dim glow of the lamp, feeling the weight of a night that should never have happened pressing down on me, even before it began. My husband is in the kitchen, talking quietly to someone I barely know, his friend who had just arrived, and there's a strange air in the room, a mixture of tension and expectation that I can't quite place. I trace the rim of my coffee cup with a finger, trying to steady my racing thoughts, try to remind myself that this is just another evening, just another visit. But my heart keeps tightening in my chest, and I know I can't fool myself. Something is different tonight. Our marriage has always been complicated, not unhappy exactly, but distant. Love lingers like a soft shadow between us, familiar, yet lacking warmth. He is a good man, my husband, patient and sometimes kind, but lately I feel invisible, as if I exist merely to fill the space he once held for me in his heart. The laughter we shared has grown sparse, the touches rare and fleeting. I have tried to ignore the silence, tried to fill the empty spaces with small routines, cooking his favorite meals, keeping the house just so, but it never seems to be enough. And now, as I hear the low hum of voices from the kitchen, I realize that my attempts at normalcy have done nothing to bridge the gap that has slowly grown between us. When the doorbell rang earlier, I wasn't expecting anyone. My husband mentioned his friend casually over breakfast, saying he would stop by, but there was a hint in his tone I hadn't noticed before, a quiet urgency, an unspoken request hidden beneath his usual calmness. I greeted the man with polite curiosity, a smile that felt strained even as I forced it onto my face. He was handsome in a simple way, with a confidence that seemed effortless, a charm I hadn't realized I could notice anymore. He talked to my husband about trivial things, laughter spilling lightly into the room, and I felt an unexpected warmth at the sound of it. Then he turned to me. Just a simple glance, just a fleeting smile, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't attraction exactly, at least not entirely, but it was curiosity, a spark I had long thought extinguished. I found myself laughing at his jokes, feeling a flutter of excitement I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. And that's when my husband said it. Not directly, not in a cruel or commanding way, but his words struck me nonetheless. He suggested, gently, almost playfully, that I spend some time with his friend tonight. He didn't frame it as a question or a request. Exactly. It was an invitation wrapped in a strange sort of challenge, and I froze. My mind spun, trying to make sense of what I had heard, trying to catch my breath against the pounding of my heart. I excused myself under the pretense of checking on something in the bedroom, but every step I took felt heavy, as though the air itself had thickened around me. I stared at the reflection in the mirror, at the woman staring back, questioning herself, questioning her own instincts. What was I supposed to feel? Salt? Betrayal? Confusion? There was a whisper in my mind telling me to run, to leave, to insist that this was wrong, but another voice, quiet, dangerous, seductive, urged me to consider it, to explore the feelings that had lain dormant for so long. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a precipice, looking down into a place I had promised myself I would never enter, and yet I couldn't turn away. As the minutes ticked by, I could hear them laughing lightly again, the sound drifting down the hall. I wanted to tell myself it was nothing, that it was harmless, that I should stay strong and ignore the invitation woven into the night air. But I couldn't. I felt drawn to the idea of connection, of attention, of being seen in a way I hadn't been seen for years. I sat back down on the sofa, clutching the edge of the cushion, and tried to steady my breathing, try to remind myself of loyalty, of promises made, of the life we had built together. And yet, with each laugh, each casual glance, I felt the walls I had built around my heart beginning to crack, threatening to crumble entirely. The night stretched ahead of me like an uncertain path, each step heavier than the last. I knew, deep down, that whatever happened next could change everything. Our marriage, my sense of self, the quiet, familiar world I had relied upon for years. And still, despite the fear, despite the guilt, despite the voice screaming inside me to resist, a part of me was curious. A part of me wanted to see where this path might lead, even if it led me into darkness. I didn't know yet whether I would step forward or retreat, but the choice was no longer mine alone. It had been placed before me, delicately, cruelly, and I could feel the weight of it pressing against my chest, demanding an answer before I was ready to give one. The evening settled in like a thick blanket, and the house felt smaller, more intimate, the air charged with an unspoken tension I couldn't ignore. I could hear my husband in the kitchen, the soft clinking of glasses, the low murmur of conversation that carried just enough laughter to make the room feel alive, yet made me painfully aware of the distance I felt from him. He wasn't looking at me the way he used to, and maybe that was why I was noticing his friend so intensely. Every movement, every glance, every smile. I tried to focus on the mundane tasks I'd set for myself, folding laundry, straightening cushions, wiping the counter. But it was impossible. My thoughts kept wandering back to them, to the suggestion my husband had made earlier, and to the strange flutter in my chest I couldn't quite name. When I first saw him up close, the friend, there was something magnetic about the way he moved, the ease with which he filled the space. He wasn't overtly flirtatious, at least not yet, but there was a subtle warmth in his gestures that made me aware of my own absence from the world of attention I craved. He laughed at a joke my husband made, and then his eyes met mine for a fleeting second, just long enough for my heart to skip a beat. I felt my palms grow slightly clammy, my stomach tighten, as though some hidden part of me had recognized him as more than just a visitor. My husband watched from across the room, calm, almost detached, and I felt a shiver run through me at the realization that he was deliberately leaving this space for us, leaving me to navigate something I wasn't sure I wanted to confront. Minutes passed like hours. Each small gesture from him, a hand brushing over a table, a light laugh, a glance lingering too long, seemed amplified in the silence between us. I caught myself smiling when he spoke to me directly, a simple question about the book I had been reading or the music I liked, and the sound of my own laugh startled me. I hadn't realized how hungry I was for attention, for validation, for connection. It was as if the years of quiet loneliness, the routine of a marriage that had grown comfortable but distant, had left a hollow I hadn't dared to admit existed. And now, standing at the edge of something I wasn't supposed to step into, I felt the pull of desire, curiosity, and fear all at once. Then he moved closer, not aggressively, not intentionally provocative, but close enough that I could feel the heat of his presence. He asked me a question about something trivial, about a story in a newspaper, about a memory from the small talk we had shared earlier, and I noticed the way he waited for my answer, the way his attention lingered entirely on me. I wanted to look away, to retreat, to remind myself of my vows, of loyalty, of the life I had built with my husband. But something in me resisted. I wanted to be noticed, to be seen, to feel desired in a way I hadn't felt in years, and my heart was a drumbeat in my chest, and my mind spun with conflicting emotions. I thought about my husband, the life we shared, the comfort and stability we had cultivated. And yet, I also thought about the thrill, the danger, the forbidden energy radiating from the man standing before me. I felt drawn to him, yes, but more than that, I felt a strange awakening of a part of myself I had forgotten, the part that wanted to be bold, to break the rules, to explore the limits of what I was willing to feel. It wasn't just physical attraction. It was an emotional temptation, a test of my own boundaries, a quiet, insistent whisper that asked, "What if you allowed yourself to step forward?" At one point, my husband excused himself, leaving us alone for the first time since the friend had arrived. The house seemed smaller, the silence louder, and every movement I made felt exaggerated in the quiet. I could feel his eyes on me, even when I thought he wasn't watching. He moved closer, leaning slightly over the arm of the chair, asking questions, sharing stories, and I felt my resolve weakening. There was no rush, no pressure, just the gentle, insistent presence of someone who wanted to connect with me, who was offering attention I hadn't felt in years. And somewhere deep inside, I realized that I wanted it, but fear was there too, knotting my stomach, curling in my chest. What was I doing? How could I even consider this? The rules I had lived by, the promises I had made, all of them screamed at me to stop. And yet, the pull was irresistible. I felt myself teetering on a precipice, unsure if I would step forward or retreat. My fingers fidgeted in my lap, my breathing quickened, and my mind raced through the consequences, the shame, the thrill, the guilt. And then, just as I thought I might be able to resist, he smiled that small, easy smile, and I felt the last of my defenses begin to crumble. I didn't know it yet, but the night was only beginning. What was meant to be a simple evening had already become a test of desire, temptation, and loyalty. And as I sat there, staring at the man who shouldn't have this power over me, I realized that nothing would ever feel the same again. The house had grown quieter, the soft hum of the evening pressing against the walls, and I could feel the tension wrapping around me like a thick, invisible blanket. My husband had gone to the bedroom under some pretext, leaving the two of us alone for the first time since the night had begun. The air felt charged, and I was painfully aware of every sound, every movement, every heartbeat. Even the faint ticking of the clock seemed louder than usual, marking time that felt both endless and fleeting. I told myself to breathe, to steady my thoughts, to remind myself that this was just a fleeting moment, nothing more. But my body, my mind, my heart, all screamed something different. That he moved closer, though subtly, almost imperceptibly, closing the distance between us without words. There was something in the way he leaned, the way his gaze lingered, the quiet attentiveness that made my pulse quicken. He asked a question about a book I had been reading, and when I answered, our hands brushed. It was accidental, I told myself, but I felt a shiver run through me. I could hear my own breathing, uneven, caught somewhere between excitement and fear. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. Loyalty, desire, guilt, curiosity, and longing all tangled together until I felt dizzy just trying to sort them. Did I try to focus on something else? Anything else? The curtains, the dim glow of the lamp, the sound of the wind outside. But I couldn't. Every glance he gave me, every subtle smile, every small gesture made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. And the more I felt, the more I realized how starved I had been for attention, for acknowledgement, for a connection that didn't carry the weight of familiarity or obligation. This wasn't just temptation. It was a mirror showing me parts of myself I had forgotten, parts one had buried beneath the routines of marriage and domestic life. Then came the moment when words weren't enough. A subtle shift in his posture, a half smile that lingered just a heartbeat too long, a quiet closeness that made my skin tingle. I felt the pull in my chest, in my stomach, in my mind. It was a silent invitation, a question without words, and I froze. My thoughts spun. This is wrong. This is impossible. But what if it isn't? The duality of it tore at me. I wanted to turn away, to reclaim the sense of self I had left behind in years of quiet compromise. But I didn't. My body betrayed me. Leaning just a fraction closer, my hands lingering on the edges of the chair as though drawn by some invisible force, the friend spoke softly, casually, in a way that disarmed me. He shared a memory from his own life, something lighthearted, and I found myself laughing. It was natural, genuine, and I was surprised at the intensity of relief and warmth I felt in that small moment. My heart was a drum in my chest, and my mind was a storm of what-ifs. He asked me if I was okay, and his voice carried no judgment, no expectation, just presence, just attention. And in that presence, I realized that I wanted more than just conversation, more than just fleeting laughter. I wanted to be seen, wanted to be understood, wanted to feel something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. That I closed my eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply, and when I opened them, he was still there, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence. I told myself to resist, to step back, to remember my vows, my husband, the life I had built. But my resolve was weak, crumbling under the weight of emotion and desire. And then, almost imperceptibly, I moved closer. It was not a dramatic motion, not a conscious decision, but a small, trembling acknowledgement of curiosity and attraction. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, my palms slick with nervousness, and yet I couldn't stop. The minutes stretched on, heavy with unspoken tension. Every gesture, every glance, every faint touch carried meaning. I was aware of the line I was crossing, aware of the loyalty I was breaking, aware of the consequences that could follow. And yet, in that charged silence, I found a strange clarity, a raw, honest confrontation with desire, temptation, and the parts of myself I had kept hidden for far too long. When my husband finally appeared again, the world seemed to shift, as though the moment we had shared had been a secret etched into the very air of the room. I felt the weight of my choices pressing down, a mix of exhilaration, guilt, and fear twisting together inside me. I had stepped over a line, yes, but was not just physical. It was emotional, psychological, a collision of loyalty and desire that left me unsteady, trembling, and painfully alive. And as I sat there, alone in the quiet moments that followed, I realized that the night had changed everything, whether I was ready to admit it or not. The house was silent again, but it wasn't the comforting silence I'd grown used to. It was heavy, thick with the weight of what had happened, pressing against the walls and settling into every corner. I sat on the edge of the sofa, hands folded tightly in my lap, staring at nothing in particular. The dim lamp cast long shadows, stretching across the room like reminders of the choices I had made. I could still feel the warmth of his presence, the intensity of our shared tension, and it made me shiver, not with desire this time, but with the ache of knowing I had stepped into a place I shouldn't have. The quiet was oppressive, filled with the echoes of laughter and words that would linger in my mind for a long time, that I tried to focus on the mundane, on the ordinary tasks I had once used to fill my days, straightening cushions, adjusting the throw blankets, checking the dishes in the sink. But it was impossible to ignore the turmoil inside me. Guilt coiled around my chest like a cold hand, squeezing, reminding me that I had crossed a line that could never be undone. I thought about my husband, calm, detached, aware, leaving me to navigate my own temptation, and I wondered what his thoughts were now. Did he feel satisfaction, control, or some quiet, cold amusement at the power he held over me? The thought made me both angry and ashamed, a twisting combination that left me unsettled. I replayed the evening over and over in my mind. Every gesture, every glance, every small touch was amplified, magnified in a way that made me feel both guilty and alive. I remembered his smiles, the way he had leaned closer, the quiet attentiveness that had pulled me in without words. I remember my own responses, the tremble of my hands, the racing of my heart, the tug of something raw and undeniable inside me. It wasn't just about desire. It was about recognition, about being seen in a way I hadn't been in years, about confronting parts of myself I had long denied. And now that confrontation had consequences I could feel in every fiber of my being that I thought about my marriage, about the life I had built with my husband, about the promises we had made and the quiet routines that had once felt safe. That safety had been shattered tonight, in subtle, almost imperceptible ways, and I realized that the world I had relied upon for stability now felt uncertain. Could trust be rebuilt after this? Could I look at him the same way again, knowing that he had orchestrated a scenario where I had been tested and failed emotionally, if not fully physically? I didn't know the answer, and that uncertainty made the house feel colder, more alien, more like a place I no longer fully belonged. I thought about the friend, about his presence, his attention, the unspoken connection we had shared. I didn't feel resentment toward him, nor did I feel shame directed at him. Instead, I felt the weight of my own choices, the awareness that I had allowed myself to be drawn in, that I had stepped into a space that demanded self-reflection, honesty, and reckoning. I realized that the night had revealed more than I expected. Not just desire, not just temptation, but the vulnerability, the loneliness, and the longing that I had buried beneath years of routine and quiet compromise. Time passed slowly, each moment stretching longer than the last. I moved to the window, staring out at the darkened street. the soft glow of streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement from the earlier rain. My reflection stared back at me, a woman changed, unsettled, uncertain, yet strangely awake. I wondered if I would ever feel the same way about my husband, about my life, about myself. The boundaries I had once relied upon had shifted, and I didn't know if I could ever return to the version of myself that existed before tonight. In the end, there was no dramatic confrontation, no explosive confession, no resolution. There was only quiet, heavy, and unrelenting self-awareness. I realized that life had a way of testing us, of forcing us to confront our desires, fears, and weaknesses, and that the choices we made,